Okay, there we go. Audio input, desktop audio. Alright, so. Hello everybody, welcome to the video, to the stream actually. Let me just open up my chat. There we go. Okay, so what are we doing today? Today, if you've been reading my community posts, I emailed Game Theory to see if I could do a video with them. Probably won't be able to do that, but you know, always can do that. But in the meantime, I'm going to be watching the timeline videos. So if you don't know, Five Nights at Freddy's, it is a game series that Matt Pat, one of the creators at Game Theory, does videos about. And so he made this timeline video. There's actually 2 timeline videos out right now. I'm going to be reviewing the next one in a later video. I've already watched these 2 videos, so I have some topics I'm going to be going over. So, without further ado, let's start this off. Oh, and also, so this first video, I actually really agree with. A lot of the stuff in here I think is really insightful. The second video, I have some gripes with. But once we get to that, I will mention those. So let's just get started. Oh, and also before we start, this isn't like trying to like go after Game Theory and be like, ah, you're so wrong. No. Five Nights at Freddy's is an insanely complicated lore dump all the time. So I find it completely fine if everybody has different theories about this. This is just what Matt Pat thinks is true, which I agree with a lot of what he thinks. But you know, let's just get started. Let's just get started. Maybe.
We end the torment. 19 books, 11 games, 8 whole years.
Putting it into sorry, 5 seconds in, I already paused it. Putting it into proportion like that is absolutely insane. Oh, and I'm gonna be completely honest here. I really like Five Nights at Freddy's, but I don't think I'm a real. I wouldn't call myself a fan. I'd love to be a fan, but I wouldn't call myself a fan because I've only played 2 of the games, and that's Ultimate Custom Night and Pizzeria Simulator. And you can quickly see why those are the 2 that I've done because they're both free. Yeah, and I haven't read any of the books. I am planning on getting the character encyclopedia though, because that just seems like really important, and I want to get on the bandwagon of that. All right, but 8 years, that's absolutely insane.
All leading to this moment. The ultimate FNAF timeline is finally complete. The pieces are in place for us. Now all we have to do is put this story of tragedy, jealousy, and loss back together. Hello, Internet!
What I like about this is it's super cinematic. That's what I like about this style. That they're doing for the timeline. It's very cinematic and I love it.
Welcome to Game Theory, the show that feels like a kid revealing the class project that he's been working on all year. Except here,
wait.
Theory, the show that feels like a kid revealing the class
my FNAF project.
Project that he's been working on all year. Except here, it's the class project that I've been working on for the past decade of my life. Yep. This one is big, my friends, and I gotta admit, kinda nervous. I haven't attempted a timeline video on this franchise since 2018. Back in the days when Mike was the crying child, Afton coming back was actually a surprise, and Fazgoo wasn't a phrase I'd ever thought I'd have to utter. But since the last...
Fazgoo's weird. I'm not even gonna get into it, but Fazgoo is weird. If there's videos online about it, it's weird.
Last time I did something like this, we've had 3 more massive games, the death and revival of the FNAF movie, and more robot...
I'm excited to see that. I'm going to go see the FNAF movie in theaters. That's going to be fun. I hope they actually do a good job. I'm sure they will. Scott Cawthon's looking over it. He wouldn't hurt the fan base like that.
Kids that you can shake a staff bot at. It is exhausting trying to keep track of this whole franchise, which honestly is why I'm here today. The lore at this point is complicated. It is full of speculation and theory. So to hopefully make it a little easier for everyone and to give us all a baseline to talk about this franchise moving forward into the future, it's time to reveal my current working FNAF timeline. But just before I do, I just want to explain a couple of things. First, this timeline is massive. Seriously, it is huge. This thing towers over any video project we have ever done on the channel. But when you look at the totality of this franchise, the story of FNAF really boils down to the story of one man, William Afton. His successes, his failures, his rise to becoming co-owner of one of the most successful restaurant franchises in the world, and his eventual fall to the monsters he helped to create, only to then be reborn in a new digital form later. That's why I've decided to split this
I
timeline into three.
I wanna stop this. Okay.
And
I
being reborn
just wanted to mention
in his
something.
eventual fall.
The FNAF 6 ending, it's so good. It is. I'm pretty sure it's FNAF 6, right? Yeah. Yeah, Pizzeria Simulator was FNAF 6. Yeah. The FNAF 6 ending, it's so good. It's so powerful. It's
To the
really great.
monsters he helped to create, only to then be reborn in a new digital form later.
Glitch
That's why I've
trap.
decided to split this timeline into three main chunks.
fun.
The foundation of Freddy's, how the business started and how it came into being, the Afton era, William's decades-long murder spree, and post-Purple Guy. Basically modern FNAF. Everything that happens after the Pizzeria Simulator fire. And because there are lots of new big revelations in this thing that seemingly come out of nowhere, as well as just points I want to talk about further, I decided to dedicate one episode to each chunk. I originally wanted it to be one seamless, continuous video, but it just felt incomplete without some sort of explanation at the end of each one.
Right, so in this video, in this stream, we're going to be talking about the foundations of Freddy's, which is this video right here, this 19-minute thing. And then we're also going to be going on to the Afton era. Now, interesting thing in the second episode, they don't get through the entire Afton era, so I'm not sure if this is going to be a 4-part series, actually, but we'll have to see.
Once this whole thing's done, I promise I'm gonna merge all the narrative bits into one massive video so you can just skip my explanations. But for now, this just felt like the best, most satisfying, most complete way to do this. That being said, this is still about the story, the broad strokes of the franchise. So in order to make sure that you guys know that I'm not just pulling answers out of thin air, not only am I discussing some of the more controversial bits at the end of each chunk, we're also putting in a handy little graphic in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, which will show thumbnails, video titles, books, and any other citation.
And if I'm confused, I'm actually going to be using those as well, because there are some sections, especially in the second episode of this, that I am a bit confused about. So
that we need throughout the video. So if you wish to understand that specific statement in more detail, you know
really, we're just going to be going through this first video just for like some, just really as like a foundation. Like I'm going to be telling you like what I like about it, which is pretty much all of this first video. It's really the second video where it gets interesting.
Exactly where we've taken it from.
And he knows that as well. He knows that there's some broad strokes being made in the second.
That way you can look into those details for yourself. So sit back,
Broad
grab some
claims.
popcorn or your pitchforks if you're the type to get upset when I say something controversial, and make sure that you subscribe, since this is going to be a video that you're going to want to come back to a few times in order to fully dissect. Without any more waiting, I present
There are some pretty big jumps in this episode, but I like where he came from with them, and I like what he says about it.
to you the story of a loving, obsessive father who slowly descended into madness, and along the way,
Descent into Madness. That if you don't know, that's the name of a FNAF game that never really happened. Descent into Madness. No, it's called like Into Madness. FNAF Into Madness. I think that's what
discovered
it
the
was.
secret to eternal life.
Foundations of Freddy's.
Our story begins not in the 1980s, or even in the 1970s, but all the way back in the 1930s. It was the throes of the Great Depression, and people were in desperate need of cheap entertainment, especially in Utah, one of the states hit hardest, 4th highest unemployment in the nation, and full of transients. People looking for work in Salt Lake, finding none, and ultimately moving on to find their fortunes out in California. People were tired and they were hungry, but as they traveled, there was one thing that could lift their spirits. A simple roadside attraction called FREDBEAR'S Singin' Show. The ads were
Alright, so FREDBEAR'S Singin' Show. Yeah.
plastered
I don't know what I was going to say about that one. I lost my train of thought.
all over town, featuring an animated bear drawn in
stop
the
pausing it.
popular pie-eyed cartoon style for characters at the time. He resembled cartoons like Mickey Mouse, Felix the Cat, Betty Boop. It immediately said that this, FREDBEAR'S, was a place where like Mickey Mouse.
Something interesting I
Felix the Cat,
found.
Betty
They all have the same exact eyes, so it's like the big black oval with a little chip in it.
Boop.
And
It immediately said that
that's the same thing with him. It's a big black oval with a chip in it.
FREDBEAR'S was a place where you could bring the
Yep, and it's very cheap, only 50
family.
50
And the
cent
price,
admission.
honestly, couldn't be beat. For 50
Hey,
cents, you could get
I
food
literally
and
just said that.
entertainment as you watched the local trained real-life dancing bear perform on stage. Normally, you only got to see dancing bears at large traveling circuses like Barnum and Bailey, where the tickets would go for about $1. That's $1 without food. But this was a smaller show, like the type from the Vaughn brothers or the Robbins brothers, where tickets would sell for just a mere 50 cents. Watching that bear do tricks on stage brought a glimmer of joy at a time when so much was wrong wrong with the world. The simple show would go on for years, bringing happiness to hundreds of travelers passing through looking for a quick meal. But it left a permanent impression on one little boy, capturing his imagination in a way that nothing else had.
Little
one
William.
little boy named Billy. That was his nickname at least, but his...
Billy is interesting. I'm not sure why they think his name is Billy. They don't link anything in this section. Why is William Afton's name Billy? Billy Afton. It's found Bill is short for William, so we could have called Purple Guy Billy Afton this whole time. Interesting. So it feels just like a leap. Maybe it's a meme. If yeah, that's a bit it's a bit of a leap.
His parents like to
But-
call him William Afton. The bear could dance, it could sing. For decades, William dreamed of recreating that moment of bringing a musical bear to life, but how? William was smart, without a doubt, and he had a keen mind for business, but he wasn't the most creative. How do you make a singing, dancing bear come to life? The best he could do was using rudimentary costumes. William was inspired by the work of Walt Disney, who throughout the 50s and 60s was pioneering the use of mascot suits throughout his theme park. The big innovation? Suits with 5 fingers. This allowed the performers wearing the suits to use their natural arms and hands to interact with the guests, as opposed to the older models where the arms would just hang limply by their sides. Finally, with a simple mascot suit, he would be able to realize his childhood dream. He would be able to bring Fredbear to life. To appeal to the kids, and for copyright reasons, he changed Fredbear from a realistic brown animal to a cartoonish yellow bear with a purple hat and bow tie. But feeling like one character wasn't enough, he added another friend, a yellow rabbit with a purple vest and matching tie named Bonnie the Bunny. While Fredbear was certainly his first love, Bonnie was extra special because that was his. It was an original character that he had created from scratch. And I do
All
mean
this is checking out
scratch.
thus far.
William's hand-sewn costumes were rough, with seams and stitches visibly showing, but it was the best that he could do. And you know what? It was just enough. Bonnie and Fredbear would perform on stage to small...
So one thing I noticed when I was watching this the first time is that it's interesting that they're using the glitch trap model. It makes sense once you watch the rest of the video, but I just wanted to point that out a bit.
But enthusiastic crowds. Finally, he was able to deliver fantasy and fun to all the kids, delighting and inspiring them in the exact way that he had been delighted and inspired so many years ago. And things could have ended there. That could have been the end to his story. It could have been perfect had it not been for one thing. Other people saw the success of his idea and they wanted in. Enter Chica's Party World, a rival restaurant starring performing animal characters.
So this is their leap in this video. I do like it though. I like the idea of a rival business, and it makes sense in the story. It's all it makes sense with Chica not being one of the original Fredbear like characters. I like this though. Let's just keep this going. Oh, hello, Foxy Poundzor. I don't recognize you. Welcome to the stream and the channel.
His idea, except they did it better. William
We're just watching through the FNAF video, the FNAF timeline videos. We're on the first one. I've already watched these, so I'm just sort of stopping and commentating on them every once in a while.
may have been the first, but obviously he wasn't the best. It hurt the prideful William Afton to admit it, but this restaurant was able to do the thing that he always wanted to do. Make the animals actually come to life. All of the performers in this restaurant were robots. Simple metal skeletons that were powered by battery packs. All of them able to freely turn and talk and dance on their own, no human required. It was like magic. Magic that came from the mind of a brilliant creator named Henry Emily. This Henry, in some small way, had been able to harness...
That's kind of a funny name, I'm gonna be honest. Henry Emily. It's like two first names, sort of what's the good word for that? Like combined into one? 5 names melted into one. You're a... Oh, what number is that? It's 10, 100,000, 10,000, 100,000, million, 10 million, 100 million, billion, 10 billion, 100 billion, trillion, 10. You are a 10 trillion pound fox? Holy cow. That's insane. Alright.
the power of life itself. Afton
Just keep
admired it.
watching
He was
this.
jealous, to be sure, but he also looked upon this man with awe. Off to one side of Chica's party world was a small cabaret stage featuring an elephant magician. On the other, a hippo known to ramble on and on. That
Orville,
one was more of a
Mr.
joke
Hippo.
for parents. But it was the main stage that was for the kids. A rocking band of characters featuring a yellow chicken thing with a southern...
All right. So yeah, the editor's note says it here. Oh, hello, no mining left. Welcome to the stream. So editor's note here. So the original undamaged Chica does not exist. So that's why we have you can hear it. That's funny. So that's why it looks so weird in this
drawl
image.
named Chica, backed by a band of other country-themed characters, including a pig with a banjo, an upbeat frog from the local swimming hole, and a brown bear with a heavy southern accent.
I think they'll mention this, but we know that these are created by Henry Emily because of
Upbeat frog.
these things. This is a good image. These the mouth joints. It goes up and down, while Afton has a signature sort of like opening and closing with like a hinge. While these are like hydraulic pistons.
Bear with a
Maybe not
heavy southern
hydraulics,
accent.
but you know.
Wait, a bear? But
A
bears
bear?
were his animals. Why not a cow or a horse?
Yeah.
Something to fit the country theme a
Goodness,
bit better. Why
it's
did it have to be a bear?
Yeah, and like to add insult into injury, it's like they're gonna name it like Fredbear or like Ned Bear or
adding
something. They would
insult
never
to
do that
injury,
either.
They had the
would
nerve
they?
to call this thing Ned Bear, a direct
No way.
copy of his own
Fredbear.
Fredbear.
Whoops, that's gonna leave a mark.
A direct copy of
well,
his
actually, Fredbear has only one D and Ned Bear is two. So.
Fredbear.
Whoops, that's gonna leave a mark.
No, that was not okay. Afton's jealous admiration turned to hardened bitterness. A bitterness that would only grow over the next couple of years as families continued to choose Chica's party world over Fredbear's. William just couldn't compete
I think
with
they're
the
gonna.
appeal of the...
I think they're gonna talk about Chica's Party World more at the end of the video, but so I'll mention it more when we get to the end of the video where they mention it more. Yeah. This is the biggest leap in this video, Chica's Party World.
robots. Eventually, his restaurant would go bankrupt, only to
Yep.
get bailed out by, of course, Henry
Emily.
Another insult. Another humiliation that William wouldn't soon forget. 1979. Despite being bitter, Afton couldn't deny that what came next was a period of massive success and expansion. With the two franchises now merged into one, it was the best of both worlds. Afton's ideas with Henry's robotic expertise. The two men decided to launch under a new name, Fredbear's Family Diner, a pizza chain that would eventually come to feature a mix of humans in performing suits as well as on-stage animatronics. They decided to stick with Fredbear as the headliner, considering the yellow bear was easily identifiable as a brand and because he was the original performing animal mascot. Afton appreciated that. This new restaurant would also see a mix of characters as the two franchises merged into one, with Pig Patch and Happy Frog performing right alongside Fredbear and Bonnie. And as part of this one big Fredbear family, they even got...
I want to mention this. So I'm not sure if this is like...
Fredbear and Bonnie. And
I'm not sure if this is like a specific lineup that they have. But it's kind of weird for them to mention that it is the frog and the pig next to those two. I feel like it's just like an example. Like I'm not sure why they left Mr. Hippo and Ned Bear out of this. Well, I understand why they would leave Ned Bear out of it, but Mr. Hippo I don't understand. I like Mr. Hippo.
part of this
He's really
one
fun.
big Fredbear family, they even got themselves official merch that released, ranging from masks to magnets.
The crappy Mr. Hippo fridge magnet?
That said, not all the characters were winners. The reception to some characters was just mediocre.
Okay, so that's why they...
So they faded away into the dumpster, storage units, and retro budget tech stores of lost nostalgia, waiting for their chance to step back into the limelight if and when a...
That's interesting. Rockstar Mr. Hippo. I'd love to see that like as an actual character.
Others, though, would fare much better, like a new Pirate Fox, as well as a blue guitar-playing variant of the yellow Bonnie Bunny. Ultimately, the franchise would get so big, it would spawn its own cartoon show, Fredbear and Friends. Business was booming. In the end, Fredbear and Bonnie's popularity would be so strong that they would be able to support the Fredbear's Family Diner franchise all on their own, while also spinning off a new sister location dedicated to their friends.
A
In
sister
1983,
location.
Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
What did it say?
A
Faz
sister
token.
location dedicated to their friends. In 19...
Oh, when you collect all the Faz tokens from FNAF VR help.
83,
That makes
Freddy
sense. Okay.
Fazbear's Pizza launched, giving a dedicated home to all this new supporting cast of characters. Chica the Chicken, Bonnie the Blue Bunny, Foxy the Pirate, and of course the headliner, a brown Freddy Fazbear. Business was good, and Afton was happy, mostly. It did bother him that the one original character that he created, the one that he himself played, Golden Bonnie, got passed over for inclusion in that cartoon
Well, I mean,
show.
technically
The
you do
only
still have
character in
Bonnie,
the roster
Blue
of
Bonnie,
regulars to get
but, you
ignored
know.
for the show, but other than that, things were going smoothly. He had himself a wife, 2 sons, a daughter. He had a
That's an interesting model for his wife. We never actually get a model for his wife. Well, we do. It's a weird model, though. It's like her sitting in front of a TV. I guess you could have done Ballora there, but that'd be a bit of like a little spoiler. But I like the purple Mrs. Afton that you have there. It's pretty fun.
a thriving business. And best of all, he was able to learn the craft of robotics from the man that he both loved and hated, Henry. Together, they were constantly pushing the limits of what these characters could do. Because it was quick and easy, new characters introduced into the roster would be given a simple hand-sewn suit with 5 fingers that any performer could wear. Eventually, Henry would design one of his signature animatronics for that character, utilizing a divided mouth with either a hinged or sliding jaw.
Okay, so they do mention it. Yeah. I thought they did. Yeah. Hinge is like made by Afton, and sliding is made by Henry. I think that's what they figured out. That's what they figured out in that video. Right there at the bottom.
Design. This was the first generation of animatronics. But why stop there? Afton had big ideas. What if the animatronics weren't just locked to the stage, but could freely roam the restaurant and interact with the kids? What if his mascot suits could become animatronics? What if you could use more than just rigid metallic skeletons? Why not experiment with tubes and wires that would give the animatronics...
Yendo's very interesting. I think he talks about him more in the second episode, but Yendo's an interesting character.
fluidity and flexibility while still
The
providing
endoskeletons
structure.
of, like,
The possibilities for
The Funtime animatronics and like Baby and stuff like that.
this technology were endless. Afton fell in love with robotics. He had started with a dream of bringing one simple singing bear to life, but with robots, he had stumbled across the tools that gave him the ability to control life itself. And thanks to Henry, he was practically speedrunning his way to an engineering degree. And while William wouldn't admit it out loud, one other thing that kept pushing him forward was the desire to beat his former rival, to prove himself smarter and more capable, to surpass the man who everyone else considered to be a visionary genius. But pride cometh before the fall, and tragedy was about to strike. Okay, so that brings us to the end of part 1 of the story. That said,
All right,
at the end of
beautiful.
each of these chunks,
Part
I want
1
to
is
break down
over.
some of the logical leaps that I made, since the more
Yes.
narrative format doesn't
Talk about
give me much of a chance to justify
the
a lot of
Chica's
the big
Party World.
decisions.
That's what he's gonna be talking
Admittedly,
about right
there are some large leaps in here. Let's
That's
just
true.
start off with Fredbear's Sing and Show, shall we? We know, based on the retro poster that was hidden in Security Breach, that at least at one point, Fredbear was an actual bear. And like I called out in that narrative segment, dancing bear shows were a real form of entertainment. The only problem is that, timing-wise, none of our main characters would be the people in charge of that business in the 30s and a series of pizza restaurants in the 80s without them just being extremely old. Best case scenario, if
doesn't
Aston's
really
running
make
the
sense in
Sing
the
and
story.
Show when he's 18, that still puts him at nearly 70 when the first pizzeria opens and his murder spree begins. It just doesn't make a lot of logical sense because he doesn't become immortal until his first death in Springtrap. That's why
So it's quite a logistical leap, but I do like what they came
I
up with.
suspect that Fredbear's Sing and Show was either a family business that Afton then carried on to a new generation, or something that he saw as a kid and just wanted to recreate when he grew up.
I like the recreation theory better than the family business theory because we don't have a lot going for the family business. But this like inspiration theory is something that's really easy to just like sort of prove.
The Fredbear Sing and Show thing also starts laying the groundwork for some of the core elements of this story. That Freddy's was a place of fantasy and fun, and that Afton, despite eventually falling to become the heartless serial killer and mad scientist that we know him as, began as someone with good intentions and a love of entertaining kids.
Which is something that we never really mentioned. Afton not being like a very, very horrible person.
He wanted to bring things to life from the very beginning, a theme that recurs a lot for him throughout the rest of the franchise. Next up, let's talk about those mascot costumes. One thing that I keep going back to is the design of Glitch Trap. It's a handcrafted suit. You can see the seams and everything. It even has 5 fingers for the performer's hands. It is very much not a Springtrap suit. This is something much more rudimentary. It came out of
A spring lock suit. What? Oh, hold on. Hello.
at a time before animatronics were a part of the story. That's why I suspect that it was actually the first, predating...
Alright, so I'm gonna skip past the rest of this, and just go on to number 2, and sort of skip through this a bit as well, because I got something that I need to do. But
Page 7
we'll just
of
sort
the
of move
FNAF
through this
timeline
bit.
script. Last time we covered the origins of Freddy's. We talked about William Afton's childhood dream project of making a singing bear come to life, and the infuriating moment that his dream is copied by a rival restaurant franchise looking to steal away his success. The merger of the two franchises results in William meeting Henry, a brilliant designer with a knack for robotics. Working together, they make FREDBEAR'S flourish, spawning popular Saturday morning cartoon shows, toy lines, and spin-off restaurants under the Fazbear name. When last we left him, Afton was thriving. The world of robotics opening his... Yeah, that was his core from into to acquaint yourself...
Alright, so as I was oh wait, hold on. I also want to talk about that. But as I was saying, this is the thing that I have this is the episode I have gripes with. So I'll talk about those once we get to them.
But before Afton acquaints himself with death, I want you to take some time to acquaint yourself with our newest channel.
This was
Guys,
very
this is
exciting
a
when I saw this.
huge moment for us theorists. For the last decade, we've had this 4-player controller icon, and now we finally fill in the final missing piece. Get ready for the rollout of our newest theorist channel. Drumroll, please. Style Theory.
Woo! Alright, so I'm gonna talk about this. So, when I first heard about style theory, I was very disappointed. I'm gonna be honest here. I had no idea what it was gonna be like, and I was quite sad. But once I actually went over to Style Theory, they have like 5 episodes, I believe, up on their channel right now. Yeah, so Style Theory. Oh, they already have a short. Wow. Alright, so they have 5 videos. I've watched this one all the way through, and I've sort of gone on and off on all the other ones as well. They're actually really good. I'm going to be honest here. My only gripe with Style Theory is that it is not a 4-letter word. All the other channels, game is 4, film is 4, food is 4, even live is 4. They're all 4 letters. Style is 5 letters. That's my only gripe with it. But it seems like it's going to be really fun. It has a lot of potential. All right. We'll just skip through the rest of this
It's
little
an
announcement.
educational curve. Why history that? So you used to channel bullet. Does it make
Oh, yeah, this
our
video.
5 new episodes
I was really happy to see this video. I watched this all the way through. I actually filled out the form that helped with this video, which is pretty cool.
that you can check out. Episode of the month can be our local FREDBEAR'S Family
The Afton
Diner,
era.
and the newly opened
Alright.
Freddy Fazbear. They
Go
called
through
their
this
new
a bit
invention
fast.
the Springlock suit. And
Yep.
fittingly enough, it was symbolic of the partnership between these two men. A human suit as designed by William.
I like how they use the Markiplier model here. That is Markiplier, right? That looks a lot like Markiplier.
That could become a freestanding Henry-style robot. But because it was still new tech with kinks to work out, the rollout was limited, restricted only to the FREDBEAR'S Family Diner location. All of this meant that William was busier than ever. He didn't have time to be a full-time parent, so he designed a nanny cam system where cameras and speakers were hidden throughout the neighborhood, as well as in his youngest son's favorite toy,
Psychic Friend Fredbear.
I mean, plushy Fredbear. But since cameras just weren't enough to raise a kid, he also left childcare duties to his eldest son, Michael. There was just one problem with that.
So Michael Afton, Matt Pat did mention this. So in the character encyclopedia, which I want to get, I mentioned earlier, Michael Afton is not mentioned, which is something I definitely want to look into. Why he wouldn't be mentioned, which is why I want to get the character encyclopedia, because that is very interesting that he isn't mentioned in the character encyclopedia for being such a big character and being in like every game, or theorized to be in every game. So Matt Pat thought it was because he isn't an Afton. I'm not sure I believe that, but
Michael was far from the best babysitter. He tormented his younger brother by jump-scaring him with a foxy mask and constantly left him behind. William watched all of it from his cameras. Kids would be kids. Tomorrow was another day, after all. Except Michael's torment didn't stop. Bitter, angry thoughts would run through Michael's mind. Why did he have to be the one to take care of this whining crybaby all the time? It just wasn't fair. It was time that he got even with his brother by playing the ultimate prank. A prank that just so happened to be on this crying child's birthday. He and his friends would take his scared little brother and make him do the one thing that he was terrified of doing, getting close to the animatronics. That would be embarrassing for the kid that was such an embarrassment to him. His brother squirmed, screamed, kicked, and fought, but just as they were putting that small, squirming boy up
This is a bit disturbing, so just content warning.
to FREDBEAR'S lips, the mouth snapped shut. The sensitive spring locks inside the body had been triggered by the boy's movements, and they'd immediately clamped.
I don't know if they're triggered by the movements. I always thought it was triggered by his crying because spring locks would clam up at like moisture. So I'm not quite sure why he said movements there. It makes more sense for it to be moisture, but you know,
Down. The wriggling stopped.
small,
The boy
very
grew.
very small
It was
gripe.
just a
Doesn't
prank.
really matter.
It was meant to be funny.
But-
The boy was taken to the hospital and was immediately given an IV. Flowers and pills filled the nightstand next to his hospital.
Yeah, so we learned this in, I think it's FNAF 4? With the nightmare animatronics, something like that.
Bed. But the damage was too severe. He couldn't recover.
I think
As
it's
the younger
four.
brother's consciousness began to fade, he could hear Michael's last words, a small and flimsy apology. But his father, Williams, through the voice of
Let me
the
look that up
Fredbear plush,
quickly.
were a firm and committed promise to a dying son. You're broken. I will put you
Yeah,
back together.
yeah, FNAF
This
4.
would not be the end. No matter what, Williams' son would live again. It would just take time. Time that, right now, he just didn't have. His young son's heart flatlined as the boy faded into the inky unknown of the afterlife. In the
Yeah.
aftermath of the tragedy, changes started happening around the restaurants. Kids were now required to wear security wristbands to prevent anyone from getting outside without parental permission.
This is something that I don't think he's ever mentioned before, and I don't think anybody's really looked into, but it's something that I agree with, like the security bands and security
Any
puppet.
kid who approached
It makes sense with the security puppet minigame in FNAF 6 as well.
the exit without permission would have to answer to the security puppet, a marionette on
Mm-hmm.
strings that could fly around on rails across the restaurant to stop kids in their tracks. It was Williams' idea, inspired by Michael constantly leaving the restaurant without his brother. In the wake of FREDBEAR'S spring lock failure, all the hybrid seats were getting retired, locked away at the nearby Freddy Fazbear location. It was yet
Yep.
another tough pill to swallow after all the
Something
hard
that said
work that
that.
he and Henry had put into
Pretty
that.
sure.
William would eventually bury the boy's small body in a remote location out in the woods right alongside his drive into and out of work every day. The death of this little boy sent the family spiraling. His wife, crippled with grief, was so distraught.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier with like the Purple Guy's wife. So that's really the only time we see Purple Guy's wife in the entire series.
That all she could do was
You can argue that we also see her in like The Immortal and the Restless, or as Ballora, but this is like the only time we see like her real like human model. Not really human. It's like
sit and watch
VHS,
TV,
but you
his
know.
son Michael
you know
was
what I
bonked,
mean.
complaining of seeing
You know what I mean.
hallucinations of a golden bear standing outside of his window. The boy was so racked with guilt that he was convinced that he was being haunted by the ghost of his brother stuck inside the suit that took his life. The suit's three-toed feet digging into the wet earth. The words,
Mm-hmm.
"It's me," ringing through Michael's ears. Some nights, Michael would
This is something that I think FNAF just did a video on, like what's up with the three-toed feet like outside. He said it was related to the books with the I forget. It's not the Stitch Wraith. It's these animatronics that like bury themselves and then like dig themselves back up to go hunt children, something like that.
even go so far as to break out of his room to check the gravesite and ensure that his brother was still there. As for William himself, he disappeared into his work and his drinks. Junior's, the local bar, wasn't far from his
Junior's being a bar is something that I think makes sense, but also doesn't really have any backing to it. I just thought I mentioned that.
gravesite. He found himself going there more and more frequently, spending longer and longer amounts of time there. The bar gave him a place to think, to remember, to reflect and stew on how Henry had stolen
might
his
be-
idea for an
It might be because there's a fan game on it, but in my mind, I've always thought of Junior's as like a Freddy Fazbear location. I don't know why though.
animal-themed restaurant. How they'd cut his character out of the cartoon when everyone else was there. How Henry had humiliated him by buying him out of bankruptcy. And
It doesn't really make sense for it to be a Fazbear location, but you know, that's always how I thought of it as.
now there was his son. Henry had taken his son from him. The robotic part was the part that failed after all. William ordered one more drink, but it was one too many. The bar turned him out and told him to go home. But William didn't go home. Drunk and angry, William raced back to
Hold on, I
told
want to
him
look
to
at
go
something
home.
quickly.
William ordered one more drink, but it was one too many. The bar turned
Okay,
him out
yeah.
and told him to go home. But William didn't
Never
go home.
mind.
Drunk and angry, angry, William raced back to the restaurant to give Henry a piece of his mind, only to find someone else waiting. Henry's daughter, Charlie, locked outside of the building, bullies laughing at her through the window. Fine, some other problem to fix. But then Afton
And
got
this
an
is
idea.
where he
Beautifully
cracks.
awful idea. This was his chance to get back at the man
Terribly
that had
no good,
humiliated him
horrible,
all those
very
years
bad
ago.
idea.
Henry had killed his business, and now
Is that like
Henry's
a reference to the
robotic
Grinch?
suit had
I feel
killed
like
his
it
son. It
is.
was time for William to do some killing of his own. Let Henry feel what it's
Or like
like
some
to have
sort of
something
Dr.
you
Seuss
love
thing.
get ripped away. While parties continued inside the walls of the pizzeria, William attacked Charlie in the back alley. It felt good. He felt free. The years of resentment and bitterness trapped in his heart finally released in a moment of pure unapologetic evil. He would make Henry hurt like he hurts.
That's a very strong
In
little
that
section
moment,
right there.
William became a killer. He dropped Charlie's lifeless body and drove home, forced to confront his family problems later that night, appalled but also a little excited by what he had just done. Charlie's death would remain on the books as a random act of violence, and though Henry had suspicions about William, there was no physical evidence, nothing that could link him back to the crime. In the weeks that followed, FREDBEAR'S family diner would close for good. 2 high-profile deaths around the restaurant with 2 grieving owners in such a short period of time was just too much bad press to handle. Besides,
So
Freddy
far,
Fazbear's was
not
still
many
open,
grapes
and it
with
was a
it.
newer restaurant anyway. All the equipment from the diner,
Once we
including
actually
the
go
old
into
yellow
the section where they
security
talk about
puppet, would
sister
get
location,
retired to that location, and
that's
there
where I
they would
started
sit
having
for
issues.
2 uneventful years. The rest of 1983 and 1984 were spent quietly grieving. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and the new cast of characters were a hit. Tragic memories of their yellow predecessors quickly faded. Afton kept a low profile and buried himself in work and research, quickly reaching a workshop
I'm
and
just gonna
security
skip.
cameras. A veritable bunker, which allowed him to
I'm gonna skip forward just
Why?
a little bit.
one of his kids. All this work with Henry had gotten Afton to start learning more about life, robots, the human mind, and what a fallible machine we as humans were. Our realities so easy to manipulate with a few sensory deceptions. Deceptions like sound. With just a few sounds, he had discovered that he could
Sound illusion discs.
alter a person's vision. He could transform blank, smooth plastic robots into lumbering, twisted nightmares.
Yep.
Nightmares far scarier than he could create with actual materials. They would appear organic, rotting, putrid, terrifying. These would be his means of keeping his son Michael in the house where he belonged. Was it extreme? Maybe. But then again, this was the boy who had killed his son. He would make him sorry. So Michael would grow up not only dealing with the memories of his own...
It's interesting. I don't think they even mentioned this, but it's interesting that they think Michael is the person in FNAF 4. It's very interesting, and I'm not sure if I agree with it. That Matt, Pat, and the rest of the theorists team think that Michael's the person in the bed being terrorized by the animatronics. I mean, I guess it makes sense in the context that they're putting it in, but I just can't really. I just don't really think. Oh no, I don't really agree with it.
guilt, the hospital room, the
That's
pills,
one of my
the
gripes.
flowers, the death of his brother, but also facing literal nightmares, illusions created by sound. Michael would never forget these either. Years later, as a security guard, he would still draw pictures of them inside of his logbook. But all of these extra projects meant that his home life
I guess that does make sense that he draws it in the logbook, but
suffered even more. He was an absent father and a non-existent husband, leaving his wife cold and alone.
Why do you hide inside your walls when there is music in my halls?
it's interesting that they play this here because it doesn't really match up much, but you know.
More joy, an empty tomb.
And despite her repeated demands that he leave his office and engage with the family, he refused
Sound
time
illusion
and time
test.
again, leaving her no choice but to leave.
You burned down my house.
You
This
call
is
that a
Immortal
house?
and the
Like
Restless, a very, very confusing part of the
It's me, your
series.
son.
The baby isn't mine.
Well, how's this? I'm keeping the diamond ring.
And through it all, there was one lingering feeling. William wasn't
Immortal and
done.
the
He
Restless
had
was
gotten a
really
taste of
weird.
what it felt like to be unleashed, what it felt like to be free. Charlie's murder had unlocked something in him, and he wanted more. June 26th, 1985. Putting on the their dog had died, he would act was cautious. He would lure them with promises of cake and cookies. He told them that their dog had died. He would ask for help with homework. Susie was the first. He never
So telling him that the dog had died, I think in an earlier theory he said that that was because the dog was turned into Mangle, which I do like that, but he never really mentions that in this. Maybe he'll mention that in the episode coming up. But I really liked that. idea.
Truly forget your first. But where to hide the bodies? He couldn't sneak out. Someone would see him. He had to hide them in a place where they'd never be found and where they'd never leave the building. They had to be stuffed. Stuffed inside of the suits. No one maintained those things anyway except for him. And so Susie would go into Chica. Fritz, Jeremy, and Gabriel would come next. But it was easy. It was too easy. And with each little life he snuffed out, his lies got bigger. Their house was burning. They're just being kidnapped. Until the last one where all pretense was off. He let himself get violent. Too violent.
I'll just wait for him after school. Throw a bag
Cassidy.
over his head, hit him with a shovel, and drag him into the back of my car.
So it's interesting that they say that. That is a voice, I believe, that's the voice line that Toy Chica says in the FNAF 6 intermission. Ultimate Custom Night intermission. Talking about the pig, I believe. Pig Patch. So that's an interesting
The body
thing
of
to say
Cassidy
there.
was far more bloody and broken than any of the others. He'd let himself go too far. That one he shouldn't have killed. With no more active animatronics left, he shoved the body into the one suit that remained backstage. The
Golden
long-forgotten
Freddy.
yellow Fredbear. Now broken and discolored with age. Broken, like Cassidy was broken.
Yep.
Like his son was broken. Newspapers reported on this disappearance, naming the whole footage of the case had been hidden behind the
The
masked
missing
way
children's
over
incident, they
franchise
can't pin it
could
on
heat from security
Afton.
selling years ago. But these guys,
Makes
these
some
were
toy
special. They were a
animatronics
new breed of robot with face
that can recognize Afton to
with a
make
plan
him
in
go
place.
away.
William Eric draws the article.
He goes there to work, and he kills 5 more kids,
Better.
which is interesting. So he's killed 10 kids now,
Getting back into the suit after 2 long years
which is
of
interesting.
waiting, or knowing how dead or blood on Henry's hand. Sure that this would get it to be there. Strange. It's almost like those old robots were trying to save the kids. Save them?
What?
Then is
They
another
can't
pre-
save them. It's not like they're
Those in
real,
prison.
or are they? Oh, okay, we're in
Success,
sister
and
location.
even
Okay.
more so the unfortunate closing of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, it was clear that the stage was set, no pun intended, for another contender in children's entertainment.
Circus Baby's Pizza World. This would be the place where he could continue his work. No longer just murdering, experimenting. He needed more kids, and he needed them alive. And knowing that he couldn't show his face on the restaurant floor, he needed a way of remotely capturing his victims and preserving them for his work. With that goal in mind, he designed a new breed of animatronic. Their endoskeletons fluid and flexible. He equipped them with sound lures that could mimic voices. They could isolate children. They
This,
could
I
incapacitate
agree
and
with
contain
all
them with
this.
zero direct input from him. It was brilliant. He was brilliant. Far beyond the simple bars and wires of Henry's designs. And the characters he chose for this were uniquely his. His new roster wasn't going to be tainted by Henry's disgusting barnyard bird. Instead, it was back to his characters, his creations. Freddy, Bonnie, Foxy, as well as 2
I agree with this because it's kind of weird that there is no Funtime Chica. They are in Custom Night, which is very weird. But yeah, Funtime Chica not being there really improves this theory a lot.
2 special ones. The first, Ballora, was an homage to the woman who left him. Now she would never leave him again. The second, the titular baby, was designed with his baby in mind. Elizabeth, his youngest child. She would always be Daddy's little girl, the one that listened to him, the one that obeyed, until the day that she didn't.
Daddy, why won't you let me play with her?
This is the part I start to sort of disagree with.
Didn't you make her
I'll let it
just
play
for
through though,
me?
and then I'll talk about it.
The day before Circus Baby's Pizza World opened, she disobeyed. She didn't listen. Left alone with Baby, she got too close. The animatronic ripped in half and swallowed her whole. A scared and confused child fading into eternal darkness. By the time Afton found her, it was too late. She was gone. He immediately canceled the launch of Circus Babies under the guise of a gas leak. But wait, as he sat there at the foot of the stage, he noticed that something was different. The eye color of the robot had changed. Baby had been built with blue eyes, but now they were emerald green, the same color as Elizabeth's. Was she in there? Could this all be connected to the free-moving animatronics that he had seen at Freddy's? He had to know more.
Alright, so that section right there, I'm going to talk about that. Saying that Elizabeth Afton was captured by Circus Baby makes sense. I agree with that. That's something that I think is undeniably canon. Saying that it was the day before Circus Baby's Pizza World was opened doesn't make sense to me. I could be missing something though. To me, it doesn't make sense because in the sister location games, you are playing as you're playing as a night guard. You're playing as a guard of the thing, and the animatronics are rented out, and you have to repair them, and you have to like that's your job, repairing the animatronics that are being rented out. So it wouldn't make sense for them to have never been rented out. The business has to have been in business for a while, right? I don't think they shut it down. It doesn't make sense for it to have been shut down and then hire a guard and be still renting it out. And also Mangle is Funtime Foxy. We can all agree on that. Who kept on getting hurt over and over and over again, then just stopped repairing it, and then was imbued with the soul of a dog, which is something that's what I believe. But it just doesn't make sense for Mangle to exist if Circus Baby's Pizza World was closed before it even opened, because Elizabeth Afton was taken by Circus Baby. It just doesn't make sense.
His morning.
That's my gripe with this.
He
does. Matt Pat does talk about this at the end of the
1993.
episode. He's kind of iffy about his sister location, but you know.
Henry had clearly tried to reopen wash away had to the back to a lot of skeletons recreations.
All right, so he figures out how to do the soul stuff. This is also something I want to talk about.
Freddy's twisted, wiry endoskeleton.
So he puts it inside of Yendo, which I'm not sure where he got that from. I'd love to get more information on that, to see where he got putting the remnant into Yendo. Why that is.
Suddenly the coils came to life, like snakes writhing in a pile. What had once been them out, he had created incomplete beasts. Maybe it was his frantic movements. Maybe it was the leaky abandoned restaurant.
It was the leaky abandoned
established
restaurant.
time and time again by the games. That said, there are two things that I absolutely have to address. The first and biggest is the placement of sister location.
Yes.
Or more specifically,
That's what I'm
Elizabeth's
confused
death.
about.
To me, evidence in game seems to suggest that it was meant to come before the crying child's death in 1983. The biggest clue to this is that the crying child
something
saw
that
something.
is interesting.
Remember
I'm not
what
sure.
you saw is the phrase that's repeated over and over again by psychic friend Fredbear, aka William Afton, speaking through a walkie-talkie in the Fredbear plushie's stomach. But what did he see? Well, I think we can tell based on how the nightmare animatronics are visualized. They have mouths in their stomachs, just like Baby ripping in half at the waist to swallow a kid. There's also the empty girl's room, one presumably left behind by a dead sister. And lastly, it explains why he's scared, and more specifically why Afton wants him scared. He needs his kids to stay away from the animatronics. He doesn't want them getting too close, because the last time one of his kids got too close to a robot, his daughter died. That's then why he sets up the nightmares, to scare both Mike and the crying child away from the animatronics from that point forward. That's why books like the Character Encyclopedia outright suggest that we play as the crying child in FNAF 4. That's why he has a nanny cam following the crying child everywhere, so he can keep tabs on his kids when they're out of his sight. He can't let another Elizabeth situation happen. The death of Elizabeth also gives William Afton extra motivation for killing. He's a grieving father. His daughter was taken away from him, so Charlie should die as well. He's lashing out at the world after losing his kids. And again, we know that at least one of his children had to have died prior to Charlie's death, based on the mound of dirt that we see in Midnight Motorist. It also allows Circus Babies to open and close earlier in the timeline, which is how you wind up with Funtime Foxy appearing as Mangle in the FNAF 2 location. Basically, Elizabeth dying first has everything it needs to fit, except for the most important thing, the murder weapon. Why would Afton be building an animatronic with a giant claw in its stomach so early in the timeline? At this point, he just has...
Right, well, I gotta go do something now. But yeah, that's what I